Hello friends, I am Dr. Ishita Agarwal, Senior Resident of Obs and Gynae at Maulana Azad Medical College. Today we are going to discuss the topic of Rh isoimmunized pregnancy. So first of all, let's start with what is Rh isoimmunization. So we have an Rh negative mother, we have an Rh positive baby. Now this mother mounts an immune response against the RBCs of the fetus. These antibodies which are created in the mother's body cross the placenta, they go to the fetus and then they cause hemolysis in the fetal RBCs. This is the basic concept of Rh isoimmunization. So guys, did you know that the term isoimmunization is the same as alloimmunization? Now what are the rhesus blood group antigens? They are capital C, small c, capital D, capital E and small e. So what is the location of these antigens? They are located on the short arm of chromosome 1, that is chromosome 1p. What are the factors which can cause sensitization in the mother leading to Rh isoimmunization? So as we know, pregnancy is the most common cause. It can also occur due to an abortion, after an ectopic pregnancy. It can occur after any molar pregnancy. It can occur because of the interventions done by the doctor, such as external cephalic version or amniocentesis or chordocentesis or chorionic villus sampling. Even external trauma can cause sensitization in the mother. Procedures such as manual removal of the placenta can cause sensitization. Transfusion of Rh positive blood to an Rh negative mother can also lead to isoimmunization, as can a simple needle injury. Now there is a new concept of grandmother theory. So what is grandmother theory? So when we have a mother who is Rh positive and she has an Rh negative baby, so now in this mother the antibodies which are there can cross the placenta. Now when these go to the fetus develops an immune response and develops antibodies against the Rh antigen. Now when this baby becomes the mother herself, the antibodies which are existing in her primarily, they cause immunization against the baby. So the concept is that the isoimmunization in the baby occurs because of the antibodies which were produced by the grandmother. So let's repeat what is grandmother theory. So what we said was, we have an Rh positive mother, we have an Rh negative baby. These antibodies from the mother go to the baby. Now this baby grows up, she again becomes pregnant. Now this Rh negative mother has an Rh positive baby. She has pre-existing antibodies from her own mother, and these antibodies then cause an immune response against this Rh positive baby, who is the grandchild of the creator of the original antibodies. Let's talk about the physiology of Rh isoimmunization. Fetal RBCs start forming on day 21 post-fertilization, and manifestation of the Rh antigen on the fetal RBCs occurs on day 38 post-fertilization. The risk of isoimmunization after first pregnancy in an ABO compatible female is 16%, ABO incompatible is 2%. If we only give postpartum anti-D, it is 2%, and if we give antepartum plus postpartum anti-D, it is 0.1%. What is the ICD titer which indicates alloimmunization? That is 1:4, whereas the critical titer is taken as 1:16. And as we know, the usual affection is in the second pregnancy and beyond. Now let's talk about why the first pregnancy is not affected. So when an Rh negative mother mounts an immune response against the baby, as we know, whenever an acute immune response is mounted, IgM antibody is formed. So this IgM antibody, being large, cannot cross the placenta. Slowly in the mother, IgG antibodies get formed. These IgG antibodies can take almost as long as 6 months to form. Thus, in the second pregnancy, these IgG antibodies, which are small in size, cross the placenta and affect the second pregnancy. Now, what can be the complications of an Rh isoimmunized pregnancy? So, we can divide it into maternal complications and fetal complications. What are the maternal complications? The mother can develop preeclampsia, the mother can have polyhydramnios, These can consequently result in postpartum hemorrhage. Also, they can cause mirror syndrome. So now guys, what is mirror syndrome? Mirror syndrome, which is also known as triple edema, is basically the edema of the mother, of the baby, and that of the placenta. So now this triple edema is not specific to Rh isoimmunization. It can also occur in other conditions such as twin transfusion syndrome, associated with it can be associated with placental chorioangioma or tumors like sacrococcygeal teratoma. So basically anything which is causing hyperdynamic circulation can cause edema of the placenta, of the mother and of the baby. This triple edema is what is known as mirror syndrome. Now let's talk about the fetal complications. Now fetal complications depend on the severity of Rh isoimmunization. In the mildest form, we have what is known as the congenital hemolytic anemia. So the baby is born, the baby has hemolytic anemia, which is a mild form of anemia, and slowly it improves by itself. Secondly, in a more severe disease, the baby can develop icterus gravis neonatorum. So as the name suggests, what is icterus gravis neonatorum? Is the baby developing icterus, that is hyperbilirubinemia, in the neonatal period. So jaundice appears in the first 24 hours after birth. And why is that? Because earlier, when the mother's antibodies were causing hemolysis in the baby, the extra bilirubin which was being formed was being cleared off by the placenta. And after delivery, this clearance mechanism does not occur, and hence this jaundice occurs in the baby because of the accumulation of this bilirubin after delivery. Now when this extra bilirubin crosses the blood-brain barrier, it can cause kernicterus. Now thirdly is the most severe form, which is known as the erythroblastosis fetalis, also known as immune hydrops. So what is the definition of immune hydrops? So the definition of hydrops is collection of the fluid in minimum 2 body cavities. So collection of fluid can be in the form of pleural effusion. We can have hydrothorax, we can have pericardial effusion, we can have subcutaneous edema. Okay, so in all these forms. So erythroblastosis fetalis is defined as collection of fluid in minimum 2 body cavities. What is the pathophysiology? So see, whenever there occurs fetal hemolysis, so because of hemolysis, the baby will develop anemia. This anemia will then cause hyperdynamic circulation, which will predispose the baby to cardiac failure. Now because of anemia, there will occur decreased blood supply to the essential organs. Also, the liver and spleen try to compensate by causing extramedullary hematopoiesis. Now whenever there is excessive burden on the liver, this can cause liver dysfunction. Whenever the liver is compromised, there will occur hypoproteinemia, causing decreased osmotic pressure, and this will then result in hydrops. So let's revise. So the pathophysiology of erythroblastosis fetalis occurs because of fetal hemolysis causing anemia, which causes cardiac failure. Also, it predisposes to extramedullary hematopoiesis in the liver and spleen, causing hepatic dysfunction, which causes hypoproteinemia, which then results in hydrops. Is that fine? So when does hydrops occur? So there should be a hemoglobin deficit of at least 7 g% for hydrops to occur. And guys, did you know what is the first site of fluid collection? It is the pericardium. What are the features? How will we diagnose hydrops fetalis? So on CTG, we will get a sinusoidal pattern. On X-ray, we get what is known as the Buddha position. So what is Buddha position? Basically, when the baby develops a halo around the head because of scalp edema. And what are the USG features? So on USG, we will have placentomegaly. Placentomegaly is defined as the placental thickness of more than 4 cm in the second trimester or more than 6 cm in the third trimester. Also, there will be increased abdominal circumference because of hepatosplenomegaly. There will be increased blood flow through the umbilical vein, resulting in an umbilical vein diameter of more than 5 mm. We can find fluid in the serous cavities, and there will be cardiomegaly. So how will we diagnose cardiomegaly? We will have a cardiac circumference is to thoracic circumference of more than 50%. and the first heart chamber to enlarge is the right atrium. So let's quickly revise the features of hydrops. On CTG, there will be sinusoidal pattern. On X-ray, there will be Buddha position. On ultrasound, there will be placentomegaly, increased abdominal circumference, umbilical vein diameter of more than 5 mm, fluid in serous cavities, and cardiomegaly. Now let's talk about how do we give the anti-D prophylaxis. What is the site at which we give this injection? It is the deltoid. And what is the route by which we give? It is the intramuscular route. What is the dosage? So before 12 weeks, we typically give 50 micrograms, and after 12 weeks, we give 300 micrograms. So 300 microgram contains 1500 international units. This neutralizes feto-maternal hemorrhage of 30 ml and RBCs of 15 ml. So what did we say? That 300 microgram of anti-D contains 1500 international unit, which neutralizes blood of 30 ml and RBCs of 15 ml. Now anti-D can also cause an ICT positive status. So guys, this is very important. Many a times when we are sitting in our OPDs, we come across patients who come to us with a positive ICT status. But on taking a detailed history, we get to know that they've already received an anti-D injection. So anti-D can also cause an ICT positive status, but we should know that this titer remains less than equal to 1:4. And what was the critical titer we talked about? That is 1:16. Now, how can we quantify the amount of the feto-maternal hemorrhage? So first of all, we have a qualitative test, that is the Rosette test. So when we do a Rosette test, if the test is positive, we clearly know that feto-maternal hemorrhage has occurred. What is the quantitative test? It is something that you people have all heard about. It is the Kloher-Betke test, which is also known as the acid elution test. So as we know, the fetal RBCs contain hemoglobin F. This is resistant to denaturation by acid. So thus it can be differentiated from the maternal HbA or HbA2. So as we used to here, we also have another test which is known as the APT test, which is an alkali elution test, which is used to differentiate maternal blood from fetal blood, like in cases of vasa previa. So what did we say? That Kloher-Betke test is a quantitative test, which is an acid elution test used to differentiate maternal RBCs from fetal RBCs, whereas APT test is an alkali elution test, which is used to differentiate maternal blood from fetal blood. And the third method of quantification of feto-maternal hemorrhage is by the use of flow cytometry. Also, let's discuss what are the techniques to determine the fetal blood group. So first of all, we can diagnose it by amniocentesis, and secondly by cell-free fetal DNA. So we'll come to these details. Now, what are the investigations that we can do in a patient who is presenting to us with an Rh isoimmunized pregnancy? So as we said that the diagnosis of hydrops is based on ultrasonography. Now, what is the investigation which is done to monitor a patient with Rh isoimmunized pregnancy? So usually what we do is a middle cerebral artery peak systolic velocity assessment. So what is the basis of this middle cerebral artery peak systolic velocity? So friends, we all know that whenever anemia occurs, so the body tries to manage it by maintaining or preserving blood supply to the essential organs. And what is the most essential organ? It is our brain. So in fetal anemia, there occurs brain sparing effect. So what we find is that the middle cerebral artery peak systolic velocity of more than 1.5 multiples of median indicates increased blood flow in the middle cerebral artery, and hence it indicates fetal anemia. So what is the timing when we can assess MCA-PSV? It is done between 24 to 35 weeks period of gestation. Now we come to amniocentesis. So earlier what we used to use were Lilly's charts. What was the concept of Lilly's chart? Is whenever there occurs hemolysis, there occurs the release of bilirubin. This bilirubin collects in the amniotic fluid. Now this causes a change in the optical density of the amniotic fluid. This was assessed at a wavelength of 450 nanometer. So as we used to say, delta OD 450, which was used to assess the degree of fetal anemia. So now we have a recent update which is known as Quinon's charts. These Quinon's charts begin at 14 weeks period of gestation as opposed to Lilly's charts which began at 27 weeks period of gestation. So let's revise the investigation. For diagnosis we have USG. For monitoring we have middle cerebral artery peak systolic velocity more than 1.5 multiples of median indicating fetal anemia, and thirdly we have amniocentesis. Now let's talk about the management. Okay, so when we are sitting in the OPD, we have a mother who comes to us and she tells us that she is Rh negative. What is the first step that we do? So first of all, we need to do the father's Rh status. So first of all, we need to find out the father's Rh status. If the father is Rh negative, then it is all well and good, nothing more needs to be done. And this pregnancy can be managed as a normal pregnancy. Now the problem comes if the father is Rh positive. What is the next step? We should do an indirect Coombs test or an ICT. So let's come to the so let's say the ICT is negative. So if this ICT is negative, we can simply repeat it at 28 weeks, and if still negative, we will give the mother anti-D between 28 to 32 weeks period of gestation, and after delivery of the baby we will give a postpartum anti-D which should be given within 72 hours of birth, but it can be given up to 28 days of delivery. Okay, so if the mother is Rh negative, we will do the father's testing. If the father is Rh positive, we will next do an ICT. If ICT is negative, we will repeat it at 28 weeks, and if still negative, we give the mother anti-D injection between 28 to 32 weeks. And then after termination of pregnancy, we will again give a postpartum anti-D within 72 hours of birth or maximum up to 28 days. Now the problem arises if this ICT is positive. What is the next step? Here we need to find out what is the ICT titer. So as we talked about, what is the critical titer? 1:16. So if the titer is below this, that is below 1:16, we can simply repeat it 4 weekly and do middle cerebral artery peak systolic velocity assessment 2 to 3 weekly and let the pregnancy go on as usual if everything remains normal. If this titer becomes more than 1:16, we need to do a more frequent assessment of MCA-PSV every 1 to 2 weeks. If it remains less than 1.5 multiples of median, we can terminate the pregnancy at 37 weeks, but if this becomes more than 1.5 multiples of median, then the baby needs blood transfusion and termination of pregnancy at 34 weeks. So let's again discuss this part of the flowchart. If the ICT is positive, we need to find the titer. If the titer is less than 1:16, we can repeat it 4 weekly and MCA-PSV 2 to 3 weekly and take the pregnancy to term. If the titer is more than 1:16, we will do MCA-PSV every 1 to 2 weeks. If it remains less than 1.5 multiples of median, we can terminate the pregnancy at 37 weeks. But if it becomes more than 1.5 multiples of median, we have to terminate it at 34 weeks. Now let's discuss intrauterine fetal transfusion. So whenever the fetus develops anemia, so we need to give the baby blood to manage this anemia to prevent the development of hydrops. So what is the indication of intrauterine fetal transfusion? So there are 3 indications. If the pregnancy is less than 26 weeks period of gestation, hematocrit of less than 25% is the indicator. After 26 weeks, hematocrit of less than 30%. And the third indication is if the HB falls in zone 3 of Lilly's charts. So now what are the routes by which we can give intrauterine fetal transfusion? We can either give it intravascular, we can give it in the peritoneum, that is intraperitoneal, we can combine the 2 techniques, or we can give it intracardiac. So most commonly what do? We do intravascular fetal transfusion. So what is the site of doing intravascular fetal transfusion? It is done in the umbilical vein. And where in the umbilical vein? At the placental insertion site. it is done using a 20 to 22 gauge spinal needle. So now coming to the characteristics of the blood which should be transfused to the baby. So the best is if we have the blood as ABO identical of the fetus, if we know the ABO of the fetus. If not, we can also use O negative blood. This blood should be cross-matched with the mother's blood. Then this blood is irradiated to kill any viruses which may be there, and it should be leukodepleted. So guys, what is the meaning of leukodepleted? Is we give gamma rays in order to kill off the WBCs to avoid the baby from to avoid these RBCs from mounting a graft versus host reaction. Okay, and it should be leukodepleted. So what is the meaning of leukodepleted? Leukodepleted means the blood has been, the WBCs have been removed from this blood. Okay, so what do we do is we radiate the blood with gamma rays. Now these gamma rays will kill off the WBCs. RBCs lack DNA, so they will not be affected. Thus, there will be no graft versus host reaction which will be mounted by this transfused blood against the baby. Now this blood should be packed to a hematocrit of 80 to 90%, and the aim is to achieve a fetal hematocrit of 50%. What is the amount of blood which should be used? So we have a formula. So this formula says the final hematocrit which we aim to achieve minus the initial hematocrit of the baby divided by the hematocrit of the transfused blood, and this whole thing multiplied by the fetal placental volume. Usually we transfuse around 40 to 60 ml of blood at one time. This transfusion is repeated when hematocrit of the baby falls below 30%. And what are the timings of doing intravascular transfusion? It can be started at 18 weeks and repeated 1 to 2 weekly till 34 weeks, at which gestation any case the pregnancy would be terminated. So let's quickly revise intravascular intrauterine fetal transfusion. So as we said, it should be done at the umbilical vein using a 20 to 22 gauge spinal needle, using a blood which is ABO identical of the fetus, cross-matched with the mother's blood, irradiated and leukodepleted. It should be packed to a hematocrit of 80 to 90% to achieve a fetal hematocrit of 50%. What is the amount of blood that should be taken? That is the final hematocrit minus initial hematocrit divided by hematocrit of the transfused blood multiplied by the fetal placental volume. This transfusion can be repeated whenever the hematocrit falls to below 30%. And what are the timings is between 18 to 34 weeks. Secondly, we also have intraperitoneal transfusion, which is based on the concept of absorption of the blood by subdiaphragmatic lymphatics. So when would we prefer intraperitoneal transfusion? If the period of gestation is less than 18 weeks. So as we talked about, we cannot give intravascular transfusion at that time, as it is very difficult to access the umbilical vein that time, which would be very thin in a very small baby. So that time we prefer intraperitoneal transfusion. Now what are the differences in how we manage labor in a normal non-Rh isoimmunized Rh negative pregnancy? That is a pregnancy in which the mother is Rh negative but the baby has not been affected by these antibodies. So we should definitely do continuous fetal heart rate monitoring. There should be no fundal pushing, no membrane stripping, no manual removal of the placenta. Very importantly, we should do early cord clamping to prevent any further passage of antibodies from the mother to the baby. We should avoid the use of methyl ergometrine during active management of third stage of labor, and the cord blood from the maternal side. Friends, please remember, it is the cord blood from the maternal side which should be sent for investigations like hemoglobin estimation, hematocrit, direct Coombs test, bilirubin and blood group estimation. Now there is another thing which is known as ABO incompatibility. So when we had Rh incompatibility, it was basically when we have an Rh negative mother and an Rh positive baby. That is, antibodies absent in the mother and antibodies present in the baby. Same is the concept of ABO incompatibility. when the mother has a blood group of O and the fetus has a blood group of A or B or AB. So in this scenario, the anti-A or anti-B antibodies of the mother, which are IgG, can cross the placenta even in the first pregnancy and they can affect the fetus. But have you people heard about this? Not very frequently. And why is that? Because this disease is much milder than Rh incompatibility. Now, what is non-immune hydrops? So whatever earlier we were talking about was immune hydrops, that is hydrops occurring as a result of immune response which was mounted by the mother. Now hydrops can also occur in the absence of circulating antibodies against the RBC antigens. This is what is known as non-immune hydrops. So what are the causes of non-immune hydrops? There can be fetal causes, there can be placental causes, or there can be maternal causes. So fetal causes can be chromosomal, like trisomy 13, trisomy 18 or 21 or Turner syndrome. It can occur due to infections such as torch infections, syphilis, parvovirus B19 infections. It can occur as a result of complications of multiple pregnancy such as twin-twin transfusion syndrome or TRAP sequence, that is twin reversed arterial perfusion syndrome. It can occur as a result of hematological defects such as thalassemia or sickle cell anemia in the baby. It can occur due to sacrococcygeal teratoma in the baby. It can be due to inborn errors of metabolism like glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency, or it can be due to structural anomalies like congenital heart diseases. Coming to the placental causes, it can occur due to placental chorioangioma or angiomyxoma, or maternal causes, it can occur due to medications such as giving indomethacin to the mother. So what is the basic concept of anything which can cause non-immune hydrops? So whenever there is anything which can cause either fetal anemia like hematological defects in the baby, or anything which can cause a hyperdynamic circulation such as a sacrococcygeal teratoma or a placental chorioangioma, so it can lead to hydrops in the baby. So what are the investigations? Investigations will be according to whatever causes we read so far. So first of all, we should definitely do an ICT and blood grouping of the mother. We should do a USG, a torch serology, VDRL testing, malaria testing, fetal echo, hemoglobin electrophoresis, and amniocentesis for karyotyping. The complications and the treatment of non-immune hydrops remain the same as for immune hydrops. So guys, that is all. Thank you so much.